Hey everyone, and welcome back to today's Explainer. So, we're diving straight into a massive and honestly kind of hidden power shift today. We're talking about the transition away from traditional geographically defined nations and moving right into what our sources are calling the corporate state. It is an absolutely wild concept, so let's just jump right in. Listen to this incredibly dramatic perspective from our source text by Zoran the Dragon. Quote, Mortals once feared kings who ruled by blood. Now they fear companies who rule by bandwidth. Man, that really shatters the illusion we all kind of walk around with, doesn't it? We still tend to view the world through this lens of traditional authority, presidents, prime ministers, lawmakers. But the mechanism of ultimate control, it's no longer a royal bloodline or giant military force. It's bandwidth. If you control the literal systems that connect people, well, you hold a power that completely rivals or even surpasses any historical monarch. So, I want you to really think about this for a second. Do you belong to your country or do you belong to your platforms? It's a pretty jarring question when you stop and ask yourself. Sure, you've got a passport, you pay taxes to a local government, but where do you actually spend your time? Where does your identity live? Where do you build your reputation, connect with your friends, or even earn your living? Honestly, figuring out the answer to that is the key to understanding the modern world. To wrap our heads around this new authority, we just have to look at what these platforms actually do every single day. They regulate speech, they control identity, they manage our public squares, and they dictate economic opportunity. Historically speaking, those are strictly governmental powers. But the crazy thing is, the transformation of these tech giants didn't happen through some violent overnight revolution. As the source points out, it happened purely through scale. As these, what the text calls machine lords, grew, their platforms just quietly became essential global infrastructure. I mean, regulating what can be said and determining who gets to participate in the economy, that effectively makes them an unelected government. And that brings up the exact paradigm shift we're tracking today. The old world completely relies on written laws, physical geography, and constitutions to maintain order. But in the corporate state, power doesn't flow through legislative branches anymore. No, it flows through digital systems and platforms. Instead of a constitution debated by representatives, our lives are governed by terms of service. It's a totally stark contrast between the outdated tools of traditional states and the immensely powerful architecture wielded by these new digital sovereigns. So, how did traditional governments actually react to all of this? Well, they became entirely dependent on corporate infrastructure for their own survival. We're talking about everything from cloud storage for public records to cybersecurity that protects national secrets, right down to financial systems and emergency response networks. The reality is, traditional governments simply cannot function today without the digital infrastructure that was built and is totally owned by private platforms. Which brings us to a really stark realization from another one of our sources, Fletcher Soul Traveler. Quote, the institutions meant to regulate the machine lords now rely on them to function. Think about the irony there for a second. We constantly hear all these massive debates about how governments need to step in and regulate big tech. But how effectively can a nation actually regulate the exact same entity that's actively keeping its own lights on, storing all its data, and protecting its networks? It's kind of wild to think about. And here is the absolute core of this entire shift. The corporate state didn't overthrow governments. It simply made them obsolete. It was this quiet, completely bloodless transition of power. No armies marched, no physical capitals were stormed. By becoming the irreplaceable foundation of modern communication and commerce, traditional government essentially just became obsolete in the domains that matter most. Power wasn't conquered, It was just willingly handed over in exchange for pure convenience. So, welcome to platform citizenship. You really start to notice how citizenship has totally shifted away from geography and moved right into digital structures. Your accounts, your logins, your subscriptions, your digital reputation, and even your algorithmic visibility. Those are the real new markers of your civic participation. I mean, your social life, your cultural influence, and definitely your economic opportunities depend so heavily on these corporate structures. It's a fundamental move away from natural-born civic rights directly into purchased, platform-based access. Zoran the Dragon actually deepens this realization perfectly, saying, mortals think they belong to countries, but their lives belong to platforms. I mean, think about it. If you were to lose your passport today, yeah, it would be a massive headache. But what if you were instantly and permanently locked out of all your email accounts, your social platforms, and your digital payment apps, all at the exact same time? Your daily life would effectively just cease to function. You would literally be digitally exiled. Zero. That is exactly the number of trials you get. 0 is the number of appeals you're guaranteed before your platform's citizenship is revoked. Traditional nations require this incredibly complex legal due process before they can take away your rights. But platform citizenship, it's not granted, it's essentially leased, and it can be taken away in a microsecond with a single, simple notification. No debate, no representation, just 0 due process. So, what is the actual law of the land then? It's the terms of service. And these are absolutely not light agreements. The source highlights that these documents are often way longer than national constitutions, and honestly, they're far more complex than standard legal codes. But here is the most critical aspect. These laws can be updated and changed instantly by the platforms, entirely without your explicit consent, beyond a forced little click. They are literally the invisible, binding legal codes of our era. Now, because the corporate state isn't democratic, it obviously doesn't have a traditional police force walking the digital streets. Instead, it relies entirely on algorithmic enforcement. We're talking automated moderation, shadow bans, content filtering, and AI-driven enforcement. This is exactly how the rules are applied at scale. It represents power and control executed through pure computation, objectively dictating what survives and what is just quietly erased. Fletcher Soul Traveler points out a very grounded anxiety about this, saying, when rules can change overnight, stability becomes an illusion. And there really is a distinct lack of transparency in how these automated enforcements are calibrated. An algorithmic update pushed out on a random Tuesday night can fundamentally alter a business's entire traffic or a creator's total reach by Wednesday morning. When the laws and enforcement mechanisms are totally invisible and constantly shifting, stability in our digital lives is, well, it's really just an illusion. And this lack of stability bleeds directly right into our livelihoods, creating what the source calls the algorithmic economy. The machine lords don't just influence the global economy anymore. In so many ways, they are the economy. Digital marketplaces, payment systems, creator platforms, and gig labor markets, economic sovereignty has shifted heavily toward these platforms. It's algorithms, not free market handshakes, that now determine visibility, gig labor, and who actually gets paid at the end of the day. Zoran the Dragon perfectly summarizes this whole evolution with another great line: mortals once feared losing their jobs, now they fear losing their accounts. It's got a touch of dark, relatable humor to it, for sure, but it completely hits the nail on the head. For millions of digital entrepreneurs, creators, and gig workers out there today, being deplatformed is literally the ultimate economic death sentence. Losing an account often means losing your entire client base, your portfolio, and your means of transaction all in one fell swoop. So, we've talked about the laws and the economies, but what about the Constitution itself? In the corporate state, the unseen Constitution isn't written in ink, it is entirely written in code. The machine lords govern humanity through ranking algorithms, recommendation engines, predictive models, and behavioral analytics. According to the source text, these completely unseen systems quietly shape what people see, what they believe, what they desire, and ultimately, what they become. Which leads us to this incredibly profound question from Fletcher. If you cannot see the rules, how do you know when you are breaking them? I really want you to absorb that for a second. We are living in a society where the deepest rules governing our behavior, our visibility, and our success are completely locked away in proprietary black boxes. How do you possibly navigate a world where the speed limits and the stop signs are just invisible? And so we arrive at this incredibly stark realization. Code is law, and law, in the corporate state, is invisible. We have officially moved from a world of public, debated, highly visible laws to a realm where complex, proprietary code is the ultimate global authority. It governs quietly, it governs efficiently, and it influences entire nations without ever needing permission. The corporate state isn't some distant dystopian sci-fi future. As our text absolutely confirms, it has already arrived. We're going to leave you with this pretty chilling final thought from Zoran the Dragon. Mortals fear the rise of machines. They should fear the rise of those who command them. It's just so easy to get distracted by these science fiction fears of AI robots physically taking over the world. But the reality is far more subtle, and it's structural. So the very next time you click agree on a terms of service update, maybe just ask yourself, who is actually sovereign in your digital world? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and we will see you next time.